friends, and welcome back to Gamers Gab, the podcast by gamers for gamers. As always, it's Artsy from the Artsy Gamer, and we're continuing the series into the new year, talking about accessibility in gaming with Koi from Kuyo Koi. So, before we get into the topic of today's episode, if you would, be so kind as to introduce yourself, Koi. I mean, I know how awesome you are, but people need to know.
I mean, do I really need to introduce myself?
Yes.
No,
Yes, you do.
No. All right, fine. Let me introduce. Normally, I get introduced. A queen never introduces. Is introduced on entrance.
Yes.
Anyway, hi. My name is Koi. I'm a gamer, content creator. Just accidentally a content creator. I'm from the Philippines. Originally from the Philippines, moved here in the U.S. in the DC area, and yeah, that's really much it. My channel is all about. Apparently, it's evolving to I will stream whatever I want to stream on that day, aka I will be painting, or just chatting, or not do anything in Animal Crossing.
I think that's our favorite thing is I have no idea what I'm doing in Animal Crossing, so just come and hang out for the hilarity.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you got into content creation, was it specifically with Animal Crossing, and you've been moving on into other Nintendo games and also other PC games, is that correct?
Right. Yeah, I primarily started with Animal Crossing, just because when I started streaming, I was using a laptop instead. So I didn't have much processing power for playing a video game on my laptop and streaming it at the same time. So I couldn't do that. So I opted for hey, let's just buy a capture card, plug it into the laptop, and then play. So Animal Crossing was at the time is is the number one game that basically took over my 2020. And it's and then who knew what 2020 was that? But yeah, it's basically that's what it happens. It's it's out of technologically constraints. It's why I've started with Animal Crossing. If I had a PC, I would be playing something other games as well, which I do now have a better PC, so I can play other things now, such as Minecraft.
That's awesome. So, Koi, the gaming community knows that you're pretty open about your life, but I don't think that many are aware that you have protanomaly, which is a mild type of colorblindness that affects red specifically, but also slightly affects hues of green. And what I found was so fascinating is that roughly 9% of the biological male population have some form of red-green colorblindness. And to put into perspective, 2 of my brothers-in-law actually have that. So how did you first discover you were colorblind?
So growing up, it's it's one of those things growing up, you would not know that you're different until somebody else tells you that you're different. So you need someone else to say hey, that's not what I'm seeing myself. So I wasn't able to tell that I was colorblind up until I had to do one of the it was a science class back in grade school, and we were talking about the bodily systems in the thing. So one of them was the nervous system, and we talked about the eyes, and they said oh yes, you have cones in your eyes, blah blah blah. So this is one trick to see if your cones are working, and they held up the color blindness test, circle Ishihara test, and I am probably one of the few, if not the only one, who outspokenly said, I don't see number 6. I don't see number 21. I don't see that. I was yep, something's off. And up until I was in college and I had to do a color blindness test as part of my it was one of the things that I had to do to get into to uni was to do this physical exam. And when they flipped open the color blindness test, I already told them I'm colorblind, but for for funsies, let's do it. So we did that, and they said like, "Yep, you're colorblind." So what is it called? So that's when I actually got into the medical side field of it. I was like, okay, this is what it's all about. It's not like you're seeing, like, yeah. So from what I have been observing and like all the research and the documentation that I've read before, it's like till then was I can see red. That is my weakness. Is I am weak with regards to red and brown.
Mm-hmm.
So between those two hues, it becomes muddy, literally muddy. At certain, I can't tell. Like, is this a brown? Is it a maroon? Red? So that's where it slightly blurs on me. So, but I can still see that Artsy, your chair is red.
In comparison to my green screen right here?
Compared to your green screen, yes. It is completely red and green.
I just realized that my green screen and red chair must be a complete and total nightmare to those who are colorblind for this podcast. So apologies in advance. I must be like just in this weird gray thing, and I'm also wearing gray. So it's like this, it must be very interesting. But in addition to when you first discovered that you were colorblind, what was the moment that you realized that it affected the way that you play games?
Yes. So it started with when let's say that it's like I started as a gamer way early. Like video gaming I was a kid, like 3 years old, and my first friend was a PC. It's great. We played chess for hours because that's what I did when I was growing up. I was a nerd. I learned it's like the English language through a PC. Thanks, Mom and Dad. But no, it's like back then. It's like back in my days of when I was growing up, a PC's color is green and black. So there's really not much of a difference. It was when it was during I was playing it with my friends that it was a tanks game. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically a simulation of a tanks game where you have certain ammunitions and you try to do some it's like mental math to do to calculate the trajectory, how much power you have to shoot your cannon. And some of them are color coded that I wouldn't be able to tell that is them, that's my friend's tank because I couldn't tell the difference of the colors. That he would say, I'm this color. I'm like, I don't see that. Is that it's like, yeah, no. Sorry, that was not you. So that was it. It was more of like it tends to I just played off as back then when I was a kid. I was playing off as chaos because I wanted to, but it's more of a like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to because I couldn't tell the difference. So it's really much as like it became of a the role of colorblindness in my life for gaming. It's really more on like I tend to unintentionally do friendly fires. That's usually what happens.
I love
unintentionally.
Unintentionally bringing in the chaos to the games.
Oh, yeah, no. But I think that's the beauty of it. It's like, well, at least for me, it's like I like bringing chaos to video games. But sometimes when it's a co-op game, it's not exactly the best thing to happen.
So friends, to put into perspective, Koi and I are the first to admit that we are not experts in accessibility. In fact, there are a plethora of organizations upon just deep diving into this topic that it's almost a silent movement in order to push for game developers to incorporate accessibility options into their games. So when we're talking about accessibility, we're mostly talking about Koi's personal experience of colorblindness, but also the fact that people who do not identify as being disabled or having certain disabilities or conditions that affect the way that we play games, we use accessibility options all the time. So what we're going to use this episode for the next however long we're going to talk, because Koi is a delight to talk to, is how we as consumers look at accessibility and how we utilize them in gaming. So there is a web page that's called Game Accessibility. I think that's what it's called. Is that correct? Yeah. And it has a series of guidelines, and I'll provide the links below for all of the links that we've been utilizing. But there is almost a tiered list of categories based on how accessible a game is. And so we're going to be using a lot of the conversation today basing on that specific guideline with our favorite games, specifically Animal Crossing New Horizons, Stardew Valley, Splatoon, Minecraft, and including a game which, surprisingly, I don't think I've ever played, I don't think Koi's ever played, but we can confirm that later, is considered the most accessible game ever. So let's use the game accessibility guidelines and how our favorite games rise to the occasion or fall flat. So let's start with the game that we actually bonded over, which is Animal Crossing New Horizons.
Wait, we did?
Yeah. Right? It's not like we collabed multiple times on this game or anything on YouTube. So,
yeah. I thought we just like stumbled upon each other. Like, oh, cool. Want to collab on random game on a random game?
Half a what was it? Like at least multiple. We are 2 oceans apart at least, depending on where you go from, and 2 continents. So
yeah.
So let's start with Animal Crossing New Horizons, because I think a lot of the people who will be watching this podcast are aware of Animal Crossing New Horizons and the fact that it does a lot of great things, but also kind of falls short. So let's talk about what Animal Crossing New Horizons does right. Do you have any, do you want to start?
Well, yeah. So for me, it's like the one thing that I've always like appreciated with this game, with Animal Crossing, is the fact that their text is super legible. It's super pleasing to the eye. It's not like there's enough contrast between the font color itself and then contrast it to the always white background of the speech bubbles. So like, and it's all curvy. It's all pleasing to the eyes. It's not it's not like triggering to be like, oh, is that an N or is it an M or an R? Though I also appreciate that that Nintendo or Animal Crossing, at least in this game, Animal Crossing New Horizons, when you enter a dodo code, you can't there's no 0 or O. There's always a 0. It's always just a 0, no O's. So like, because there's the notion that
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
there's
helpful.
there's no O's in dodo codes.
Because they stole the O. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
They already bought all the O's. But yeah, so that's the one thing that I was like, text wise, I'm all for it. Like, it's legible, it's big enough, and it's like, and that really. And I think it's like there's not a lot of like sudden like changes of like lightings that I can think of. It's always been a gradual, like nothing like flickering. It's just like it's like a gradual like transition between the two. It could be fast, but it's not like a flicker.
Yeah, I think that there's really no risk of causing seizures, right? I think the only quote unquote concern would be the fireworks during the July, like the month of July or August. Yes, August. Thank you. I know how to play this game. And during
yeah, the summer festivals. Yes,
and during New Year. So, but as I said, I think one of the main concerns that I have with accessibility is that since we are such a visual species, we often base accessibility on the things that we can see. And the one thing that I've always really appreciated is, and we'll get into the issues with the audio for accessibility in a minute, is the fact that when you're fishing, that you can toggle the vibration in your console specifically to let you know when the fish have taken a bite. And but I also don't know how that affects somebody that may have issues with mobility with their hands and any coordination. So I think in regards to accessibility, as you were saying, based on text alone, it's very helpful. But let's talk about the audio for a minute.
Yeah. Say what?
Say what? I know. So, yeah.
Or rather, pretty much what you like most people would be experiencing was like if you're beside a waterfall.
Oh my gosh, it's and it's I think what I appreciated is I think Nintendo really does strive to have environmental realistic sounds in the sense that
Mhm.
when you're by a waterfall it's really loud, but when you're trying to stream and you're trying to talk, you
Mhm.
can't toggle the volume to be lower or switch what sort of sounds that you hear in the environment. And then there's the hourly music.
And there's the hourly music.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite hourly music?
Ooh, I'd probably say 5 a.m. It's
5
like,
a.m.
yeah, 5 a.m. or 1 a.m. is probably one of my favorite ones. What about
Mine
yours?
is definitely 5 a.m. It's like
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's like, which is like not, I will never hear it all the time because I usually wake up at like 9. But
Mm-hmm.
the only time I would hear it if I time travel.
Mm-hmm.
So like, but yeah, 5 a.m.
Yeah,
It's like,
and I I learned this from K Daisy that I think Animal Crossing New Horizons was the first in the franchise to feature real instruments being played. And
yes.
I really do appreciate that the music is beautiful. It is a beautifully created series. However,
Mhm.
however, I only need to listen to that song maybe once or twice. I don't need to listen to it for the entire hour. And
Yeah.
I can understand that perhaps audio, like through someone who processes audio differently, that having sound transition to the hour is helpful. But I remember reading about a year and a half ago that there was somebody who was on the autistic spectrum who said, I can't play this game because the music is driving me crazy.
Mhm.
But it also
Well,
drives me
this,
crazy.
yeah. Well, the thing is, like, what the funny thing about accessibility with gaming in general is like it's hard to cater to everyone. That
Mm-hmm.
is the name of the beast. It's a beast of itself. Like you want to be accessible to every. It's like pleasing everyone. You
Mm-hmm.
can't. You can't please everyone. It's like it's a given. Like it's more of a how much can I make this game be? Um, how much can I give control to the gamer itself, the
Mm-hmm.
consumer, to make it fitting for their play style?
Mm-hmm.
Other than like, no, I want it to be like Michelangelo painted the Mona Lisa with a smize for a reason, not because he wanted to, not because somebody else wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So like
I think that
it's
was
what
Da
it's
Vinci, by the way.
oh my god. See,
It's okay.
I definitely know my art. Yeah, definitely know my art. Anyway, so the point is like, people would argue it's like, oh, it's the art. It's like, it's for the art. That's the reason why I'm putting this much effort to soundscape.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the like, if you can't appreciate my art, don't appreciate you can't have my art. And I was like, the thing is like, that's not exactly a thing that, like it makes sense. Sure. As a work of art, it makes sense. You make it how you want to make it. But if in a business sense, it doesn't make sense.
Would you say that Nintendo, because I'm still new in playing
Mhm.
Nintendo games with the accessible eye, right? And so I'm really
Mhm.
curious whether or not it's not only a Nintendo thing where, as far as I know, Nintendo games, like the games that Nintendo created, there's really not much in the way of shifting anything because
Mhm.
that's just not how they develop their games.
Right.
But
Right.
also, I wonder if it's a cultural thing. And I don't know if we can really answer that question because we're not
Okay.
Japanese.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be able to like to answer. Yeah, I don't think we either of us can answer that. I can do say like as a point of like that there is a trend that like most western games have had the always like if not all has the an option to an accessibility option somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
like however like tweaking the audio, making the font size bigger for better or for worse, it's an option. That's tend to be that a trend for the western like um developers and publishers out there. I couldn't say that Nintendo is falling back because, like, or any Japanese or Eastern developers out there, really, it's like Capcom or Bandai. It's not like I think they're like slowly coming into terms that, like, it's back in the day, like your hardware is geared for the majority. Like usually most of these games are designed for the majority, and it's like accessibility. That's why accessibility is more of a hindsight or a afterthought rather. I think it's like because Nintendo and Sony and like Microsoft have built consoles first. They really like made sure that like, oh, we're making a console that is usable for this demographic. But now that it's becoming more apparent that like we don't need your console, we don't need your hardware, we just need your game to be able to appreciate it. Like, for example, I can have a Joy-Con, like I can buy the Switch, but I don't have to use the Joy-Cons because my hands are not comfortable when I use handheld. I will be using a third-party controller for it. So like it's not anymore like back then. The reason why it was accessibility was a afterthought because consoles it's driven by the console. Now it's driven by the actual game itself.
I never really considered that it was the console first before the game. As I said, I'm very new to the idea of what the business aspect of accessibility is, but I think many articles are arguing that, do you hate money? Because there's a whole demographic of people that would really love to play these games, but really can't because either it affects their cognitive processing, their audio processing, visual processing. They struggle with holding it for long periods of time. I know that Kato from Console Kato doesn't even use the Joy-Con. She holds them separately because it hurts her wrists. And as far as I know, she doesn't have any mobility issues with her wrists. But it is really fascinating that we are considering accessibility beyond disabilities and actually just considering a personal preference. And I think that is changing the name of the game when it comes to gaming as a business, is that, we are special snowflakes when it comes to the things that we like to play and how we play it. But so Animal Crossing kind of falls short just a bit. And I think that I really sincerely hope that Nintendo does work on changing that. But let's move to a game that you like to play, Minecraft. Yes. I know nothing of Minecraft. I played it 10 years ago. So it's probably changed a lot since then. So with accessibility in mind, well, there's a less problematic person who runs it. But look, I'm going to call it like I see it. But so what accessibility options do you use to play Minecraft?
So right now, as I think it's like I do this in all of the games, if like most, if not all of the games, is I turn on subtitles. Subtitles not just for dialogue, because Minecraft there's no dialogues really. Like there are like NPCs that are mumbling at you like you can't really put a word on it, but Minecraft does translate it as a verb instead. So villager hums, or spider hisses, lava burns, lava pops. The beauty of it is it tells you what your character is hearing, and there's a visual indicator where the general area it is. So it could be on your left, it could be on your right, it could be really far left that you have to turn, or it's like it could be like just ambient noise. Though no, it actually would say like ambient noise also gets called out, actually, now that I think about it. It does get called out as well. So that's number one accessibility that I use for Minecraft. The second would be there is a mode, because it's a first person game. And I know for a lot of people, like the reason why they can't get into the first person view is because of the field of view of the game. That's like there's just something weird that I'm seeing more or not a lot of the things that I should be seeing in IRL.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you can toggle the field of view. I don't change the field of view. I always go by default. But the only thing that I change is the motions. So
Mm-hmm.
in Minecraft, when you run or move, there's a simulated motion of your hand and your tools waving.
Mm-hmm.
So like everything is bobbing and you're also bobbing in the side so that it simulates like, yeah, you're running, you're moving. I turned that off because that for me is annoying. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is disorienting for me because I'm like, I don't want things to be moving all the time. I know like the things around me should be the one moving. And I don't want to be moving myself. If I want to move myself, I want to have input to it. So, like for example, like I'm using an item, I'm swinging a pickaxe. Those are explicit actions. I don't want it to be like, oh, because I'm moving and walking in general. That's why my hand is bobbing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So those are the two
Yeah.
that I use for Minecraft. Yeah, definitely.
One of the main reasons that I had issues with Minecraft was the fact that I get motion sickness with first person, and I don't know if that's
Mm.
just my brain processes something differently. But I also, to put into perspective, I was introduced to Minecraft when I was going through a really rough time, and I was like in the peak of my zombie phobia, and even the creepers I couldn't handle. And so,
Mm.
what I really appreciate about Minecraft, and I know it's still possible, is that you can be in creative mode so that it
Mm.
removes any form of anxiety where you can just be a builder and it's fine. But
Mhm.
what is something that is lacking in Minecraft, do you think, when it comes to accessibility?
I guess it's like the one I would say that's lacking. Well, I was gonna say like colors, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when Minecraft launched, like back in 10 years ago, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Did Minecraft come out? Can't remember, but it has been a while. Um, it was just like a white block is a white block. A cobblestone block is a cobblestone block. It's
Mm-hmm.
gray, it's white, and black. It was until the colors they had an update that's just dedicated to colors. It was fantastic up until you realize that it's the same patterns and textures
Oh
for
no.
so you know there's now they introduced the concrete block, which is the flattest thing that you could ever see as
Mm-hmm.
a color, and then just change the colors, but the block texture is just the same. It's flat.
Mm-hmm.
That is excruciating because like suddenly like what like is there a different because now there's like 20 shades of red that's available to you,
Okay.
but you can't even tell the difference with like which one is like oh, this is red because it's this block.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's supposed to be red. Oh, this has been brown all along. So so those are the things that are like were like the things that like Minecraft still lacks is they're getting better at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like it's not more just like color. It is color plus a pattern or a texture. It could be
Mm-hmm.
it's a little some of the texture differences between are still subtle,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like but it's made subtle so that you can blend it with other blocks. So it's like a palette type art type of thing.
Okay.
So you can it's like if you're a painter or like a builder as some would coin in the community, if you don't see the color, you could paint with the pattern and the texture with it. So I guess that's a thing that they can do. But the thing is, like, Minecraft doesn't provide enough tools to allow, for example, like people like with visual disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, the the color is significant. The color and pattern texture significance is definitely could be improved.
Mm-hmm.
But like for me, the auditory cues, I personally don't have any qualms with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So and let's go back to another like very colorful game that you also play, which is Splatoon. And I
Yes.
say this that I've only seen it once played, and it was by a 12-year-old, so I have no idea whether or not he was just kind of like all over the place because of where he was at in his gaming
Hmm.
experience. But there's a lot of color and a lot of movement
Yes.
and a lot lot that
Yes.
goes into Splatoon. So
Ooh,
what?
chaos.
Oh, chaos! I know. It's like our
Yeah,
brand or something, Koi.
I know.
So what are the accessibility toggles that you utilize for Splatoon, if any?
Okay, so there is the thing is like with Splatoon. So to give you like people who are potentially not like do not know what Splatoon is about. Splatoon is basically a turf war. It's a turfing game.
Hmm.
You play as a squid, an inkling, or an octoling, um, a squid or a kid. It's a song. It's their song. Um, and the point of it, the general gist of it is color as in, like you play with your color, with your team color. The problem with that is that at certain combination, it's always different. Your color is always different with the team's colors. It's not just red versus green or blue and red. It's
Hmm.
like orange versus purple or something, or blue versus green, or peanut butter versus jelly. Um, there's a color that is peanut butter versus jelly.
That's awesome.
It's yeah. Um, but the problem with that is some color combinations would not be as, you know, as we talked about. Like some colors would just be bland for this, someone who is like have probably the same or more severe case as me, my color blindness. So Splatoon does have a color blind mode, but it's not that it's patterned. It just locks you from seeing those two colors. So that is just consistent for you. It's like
Oh,
for
okay.
your gameplay, you only see your color to be blue, the other players to be yellow.
Okay.
So, so that's I do not use that because I do see the colors still, so I appreciate it. I like to appreciate
Hmm.
the colors. And the thing is, like, there is really nothing else that I need to turn on. Like, there's also it's like there are three things that are accessible for Splatoon. Because one is the colors that you can tweak it. You can fix that easily with color locking. Second is there's the motion, like how you control your character, how you shoot, how you aim. You can either use your Joy-Cons like movement or your Pro Controller's movements, or you can
Hmm.
use your sticks to aim. So you can either aim by actually tilting the sticks, or you can aim by pointing, moving towards it. So, and you can set it to be, you can use both at the same time. And I use both at the same time. Um, I tend to use the sticks for bigger movements, and then
Hmm.
the motions to be like for finer adjustments. So that's what I use. The third that I like also with Splatoon is the visual indications for audio.
Hmm.
But I say that because each weapon in Splatoon has a special attack,
Hmm.
and there's only like four specials out there, but it's like they're pretty distinct because they have first like they have an audio cue. You know if it's what special is incoming because you heard it. It could be missiles, it could be like rain about the rain, or a ray gun towards you, or like somebody's like everyone's yelling, booyah. It's like everyone's cheering for the same team. So okay, there's something's coming up. But if you don't see that or hear that, you can see it. There is a audio cue where, for example, there's a special for missiles. You can tell if you're being targeted because your character would have like markings on it that there's like 5 missiles towards you,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was like shot at this direction. So it's a two-way street. So you can like where you're being targeted, like which direction it was fired,
Hmm.
but you also know that you are being targeted as well, and like how many is going towards you. So like you can start like planning like where to go. There's also the um, special where you can give your teammates ink armor, armors and shields. So basically, what happens there is like there's the cue for you as a teammate. You basically go all color ink, your ink color. It's like a solid color for you, which is good for you so that you know that you have armor, which is also good for your enemies because they can see that you have armor on.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that they also use is you have glowing eyes. So you're not just like slathered in paint. You are pretty much, yes, I am shielded right now. I have one life with me. So I have a one up with me, say, for that ability. So there are like, it's not like it's their abilities are, yeah, the attack patterns and the specials that are used in the game is driven by one aspect. Splatoon, as at least from what I have observed, has multiple cues for the same attack. Really.
Okay. We already kind of talked about which accessibility options that we use the most often, and I feel that we are not the people to have the conversation when it comes to cognitive or mobile, because I don't think we necessarily have those issues, or perhaps we don't know that the certain accessibility options that we toggle or utilize are specifically for those things. But as a consumer, which settings should always be available in a game?
Sensitivity, like control and sensitivity.
I
Definitely, like if I want to slowly inch into something, I want to be able to slowly inch and not just like, like to like, for example, like I also have like, well, I'm a programmer by trade. During the day, I'm a programmer, so I am always on the keyboard 24/7, if not 25/7. So which means like I am prone to having carpal tunnel being developed, which is basically uh, a disability where you can't feel your three fingers. You can't like control it, like feel anything on those three fingers at a certain point. So me being not needing to tilt something as hard or shake as it's like as hard or lightly helps a lot, so that like I don't have to exacerbate, like especially if it's a long day of typing. I want to, at the end of the day, cool down and play some video games, and I want to just chill. I don't want to violently throw my Joy-Cons across the room just so that I can like dig a hole.
Oh, I agree.
Like, or terraform. Or
I agree.
Terraform.
I also think that there should be, if it is a square based, or like, for example, Animal Crossing works in squares, right? When it comes to terraforming and building, what I think would have been incredibly easy to utilize is highlighting, like having a little highlight area where you dig and aim, because I think everyone can relate to how obnoxious that is. This notion,
no.
right?
To dig to waterscape and unwaterscape the same spot 3 times in a row.
Yeah, I know. And I was never really into shooter games until I was introduced to BioWare's Mass Effect series. And so the ability to have sensitivity with where I was aiming, and also being able to pause where I could aim correctly, was incredibly helpful. And it's really interesting to me that accessibility incorporates a lot of like, for those who have true disabilities, like, hearing and audio, but it's also just this preference of what allows you to have I don't want to say easier as in people are cheating, but easier as in it allows them to enjoy the game without getting super frustrated, and allows them to complete it. But but highlighting stuff should always be available, and turning off the ambience, like the music, that should always be available.
Yes. Well, that's the thing with accessibility. It's not just like back then, it's more on like, let's include everyone into this sphere that we have, into the gaming sphere. Now it's like we've kind of established that like technology is there, that like we can make our own controllers and like devices to be able to play the games.
Mm-hmm.
It's now more on how do we make it the barrier for entry easier for them
Mm-hmm.
to be like able to play it. So because like I can have a like my custom Joy-Cons or a Pro controller that could like easily make me like it's not going to tire my wrists for holding it for too long. But if the game itself doesn't actually like allow me to, for example, again adjust the sensitivity of my movements, it kind of defeats the purpose, because I'm like I still need to struggle to be able to enjoy this game, which at that point I might not be able to enjoy the game. Which is like actually, it's like reading some of the articles, and I don't know if have you heard of the Souls games, Dark Souls?
Yeah, I have friends who play it. I've never played it personally, but it's a very much beloved game, and I think my husband plays it.
It's a beloved game. It's a beloved game. It's beloved and beloved. Because it's amazingly difficult. It's a beautiful game. It's notoriously difficult because it has to be difficult. There has been like debates on Reddit and the internet somewhere, where it's like the Souls games need to have like an easy mode or a story mode, which some games do actually.
Mass Effect does.
So there's a bunch of like Which game did you say?
Mass Effect. So Mass Effect has the ability where you can have like hardcore, where holy moly, it is super stressful. And then there's the casual playthrough where fighting your opponents is not as difficult as it would be or requires. And I typically play on normal, just because I like to struggle, but I also don't like to play the game 5 times. Yeah.
There is a I don't know if you've heard of the game Amnesia.
I have.
There's a mode now from an update with them where they turn off all the scares and you're just there for the story.
Really? That's so interesting.
Yeah. So that's another accessibility thing. I am a scaredy cat. I would not play that even with the lights on. But knowing that I can turn off the scares and just be unnerved because of the story, I might be able to more inclined to play that. So there are games there that are basically like, okay, let's get rid of the aspect. Like, I want you to appreciate the story that we put into this game, but like, let's get rid of the game itself if that's too much for you to handle, like, or that's not your focus, the goal of your game. You want to experience the story.
In another accessible thing, because I think you talked about how in previous years, especially in Japanese or Eastern companies, that it was about the console, not necessarily about the game. And I wanted to play Metroid Dread, and my husband was like, well, let's introduce you to like the early, Super Metroid and see how you feel. And so we were able to upload it onto my computer, and I could play with a console, but I couldn't play the game because I kept messing up like the movements, because I'm so used to playing games with a different strategy with, what X is, what A is, what B is. And we were able to edit the buttons so that my movement memory was able to play the game better. And it was an instant success. So again, asking as a consumer and as a gamer, my personal opinion is that I think games should probably move toward having different ways that we can play it, either by the computer or by the console, because I love the Switch. I really do. It's probably one of my favorite consoles that I've ever had. It's 2 of the consoles I've ever had, but I do love it. I love how it feels, and I love the games that we play it on. But if there was a game that you could switch from either PC to console or console to PC, which one would it be?
Ooh, console to PC or PC to console. Definitely, I would say the funny thing is, like, I like a shooter game. I want to play it on the Switch itself.
I agree.
Not any console, the Switch, because most shooter games are, if not all. Granted, it's only been Splatoon is the only shooter game that I've been playing on the Switch. the fact that I have two ways to aim or to move helps a lot. That I can tilt my Joy-Con, my controller, and also use the sticks. Great. I don't know how I can like. That's the reason why, like back then, I would still now. I do not want to play shooting games on other than the PC. It was just a PC like game. I'm a PC gamer, like with shooting games. When I tried to play it on the PlayStation, and I was just like,
You can't.
how do you control?
Yeah.
How do you aim? I'm like, everything's moving too fast for me to aim. I can't do this. So
I think
that's like,
I think that's something that we kind of forgot also to add as accessibility is being able to change the controls. So even with a PC game on the keyboard, we can change from being key binding, yeah. And I totally forgot about that, especially when you were referring to carpal tunnel syndrome or even tendinitis, because that's something that artists have to worry about with either shoulder injuries or with wrist injuries. Is that sometimes we need to have the ability to like lay our hands flat and stretch it instead of having it crunched like a little hobgoblins on the mouse. So I think that's something that should always be available in a game. Is I really sincerely hope that I think there was a third party like control system for the Switch that looks a lot like the 3DS. Have you seen that lately? It just popped up.
I have not.
No, I there was another content creator who had mentioned it in their live streams, but I do think we're moving towards not only how games are accessible, but how consoles are accessible, specifically because I know that our computers, specifically PCs, I don't know about Macs personally, but I know that we're starting to get to the point where people are able to develop their preferences and tinker with it until the point that we feel comfortable to play a game. And I've always been really concerned about this notion that the concept of accessibility means that a person is cheating because of the way that they play. How do you feel about the idea that accessibility could be considered cheating?
So I don't think that, like, in a sense, maybe it's a sense of competitiveness. I think the term cheating is more geared towards the competitive scenes. So for me, if I wanted to play a game, like even back then in the PlayStation 1, I would have like cheats on just so that I can enjoy. That's how I enjoy the game. But like it doesn't ruin your experience, other people's experience, how I play the game, because that's how I enjoyed it. I like not worrying about dying all the time. I want to be able to just keep going and trying and not feel the game over screen and I have to start all the way from the very beginning.
Like Super Metroid?
Yeah.
So I guess then perhaps it is a shared agreement that accessibility is not necessarily, it's not cheating. It really is just allowing for people to play the way they want.
Yeah, exactly. And to play in general. Because like, again, even if it's in the competitive scene, one would say, I don't know if is it cheating for divers or swimmers or athletic swimmers to be shaving their legs? Because it makes them more fluid dynamic.
Interesting.
Are they should everyone be wearing ball gowns to swim? Like people would tinker their stuff, their gameplay, their style to be able to outperform everyone else. And that's the point of making things giving all these tools allows more players to be able to stand up to the competition. Not necessarily I made this controller so that I can make things easier for them. If that's the case, then you should also then use that controller. So that everyone is on the same playing field.
So what you're saying is that the accessibility toggle should then just be incorporated for everyone who's playing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it should just be on by default, and you can turn it off if you don't want to.
That would be a really interesting question. And I don't watch competitive gaming like exports or whatever, or even League of Legends or anything like that. So it would be really interesting to hear from the perspective of a person who utilizes, but through necessity, like true necessity, not just preference, but true necessity in the competitive field of gaming, because I'm not a competitive person except for last crosser standing, but that's neither here nor there. So, so
triggered.
I know,
EJ.
super triggered. So we are kind of nearing the end, and I think what would be a really nice ending question, because we don't really, I was going to ask the question about how The Last of Us 2 is considered the most accessible game ever, but I've never played it. I don't know if you've ever played it.
I've dabbled on the first
The first game.
I wasn't able to fit. First game, and I started playing the second game, but I didn't finish it.
Yeah.
Because life got busy.
Yeah. So, but I'll leave like the links of what makes it so accessible in the description below. But I think what we can finally do in ending this interview is let's ask the question: can a game be accessible to absolutely everyone, and what that sort of game would look like?
So the funny thing is, like, accessibility is a major part of my full-time career. It's like I'm a web developer, so I'm an e-commerce driven product like developer. So it has to be like I have to cater to as many like customers that I can to make the most bang for my buck, for everyone's profits and the tools that we make. Also for legal sake, but neither here or there. But I don't think so. I don't think it's possible to make a game that is super accessible. I think a game is possible to be playable. Like, because the reason why I'm saying it's not possible to be accessible or completely accessible is because there's always going to be that one case. It's not going to be 100% that, unfortunately. For example, a game like shines literally for being played with color, but for someone who doesn't see color, and you have to like accommodate for that, your art of making that game diminishes, and your head's value diminishes. But the intrinsic value of it being able to be played by more people goes up. So it really depends on like how much like pride, I guess, as a developer, can you put away so that you can cater to more. So that's why, again, I'm a developer, I'm a programmer, I have pride. It's hard for me to make things accessible. Because this is how I developed it, this is how I designed it. Why can't you just use it how I told you? And and I know for a fact that will change. I'm a developer. I am learning how to develop and program more accessible tools. I'm trying to get my certification for it. I'm taking classes, but that's still going to be a hindrance for a lot of people. As a lot of publishers and game developers is how much are they willing to compromise for their audience and their art?
That's a very fair question, and I do think that there has to be a middleman for making it as accessible to as many people as possible without compromising the integrity of the game development. And maybe that means that they have to, from the get-go with planning, what is going to be accessible, what things that the players can toggle and play around with, which I think is what the developers of The Last of Us 2 did. Was they actually worked with organizations focused on accessibility in order to make it the most accessible as it possibly could be, to the point where a legally blind person was able to play this game and was sobbing. It was a beautiful moment. So I think ultimately, I really hope this conversation really did blow my mind, because I did not realize how much of an umbrella term the accessibility is in gaming, and that we still have a long way to go, not only as as consumers, but as game developers and programmers, of what that means for the future of gaming, and how it can still be fun and challenging, but not to the point where it's unplayable.
Yeah. Again, it's like, I guess going back to The Last of Us. So the reason why I like you brought it up, like we both read the same article, I think.
Yeah, we did.
The Last of Naughty Dog, when they developed The Last of Us, they opted, like, I don't know the complete story, but from what I've gathered is that their goal for the game is for the player to experience the story and not the gameplay. The gameplay is just a means to an end of the story. So it's like one of the story ways for the story to be driven, but it's not the story. Like, they wanted to showcase, I don't know the whole story of The Last of Us 2, so I can't even spoil it.
Okay, neither can I. I don't know.
So I just know it's a development of like the path after the first one. What? Like the story moving forward. So how did the events transpire outside of the gameplay itself? So it's more of a how did you get to this action type of game.
I wish we had a little bit more time, since we're actually nearing the end, because I think, wow, it would have been a really interesting conversation to talk about gameplay as a means to an end versus the storyline, and that the fact that many gamers these days, some do just like to mindlessly, do turf wars and fight, not mindlessly in a mean way, but like just you want to shoot and click and have a fun time, versus people want to be immersed in a game. So that is probably a topic and conversation for another Gamers Gab. But Koi, thank you so much for coming and being part of this project with me. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
In the interwebs. Well, in these series of, first and foremost, Artsy, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to do another collab, and it's less chaotic, but it's always chaotic when it's the two of us collab.
Always.
Where can people find me in the interwebs of these tubes? I can be found here over on YouTube, youtube.com/kuyakoi. Over on Twitter as well, the same handler. Instagram is a different one, because Instagram someone has my username already, and I, can't take over. So it's kuya.koi. So unfortunate. But kuyakoi, Twitter, and usually I'm in YouTube. I do have a Discord server, but you just have to hop onto my channel to get the link for that.
And I will absolutely
make sure we're not I swear we're not a cult. We're not a cult.
Don't lie to the people, Koi.
We are not a cult.
But I promise that all of the links for where Koi can be found will be in the description below, as well as all of the links about accessibility if you were interested. And I think it'd be really fun in the comments, to talk about your experiences with accessibility, if you identify as a disabled gamer or a person who plays games with disabilities, and how it affects you. And I think with that, friends, we'll talk to you and see you on the flip side. So,
Thanks so much. Bye.